హలో కొంచెం తగ్గితే బాగుంటుంది నాకు నువ్వు కూడా కట్ చేసావు
మరి నెక్స్ట్ పోవాలంటే డోంట్ ఎనీథింగ్ ఇక్కడే చేంజ్ ఇంకొక ప్రెజెంటేషన్ దెన్ క్లోజ్ దిస్ దెన్ ఓపెన్ దట్ తెలుపు. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Saroja Kopala, one of the senior consultants at Nova Fertility Center. Today we'll talk to you about the stimulation protocols for IUI, after which we'll do stimulation protocols for IVF. Okay, are you able to hear me?
Yes, madam.
Yes, okay. So now this is IUI. So first we'll start off and complete off the stimulation protocols for IUI, after which we'll do the stimulation protocols for IVF. So what is our main aim? So in an IUI cycle, we don't want many follicles. We want minimum of 1 or maximum of 3 pre-ovulatory follicles, and the triple endometrium layer should be more than 8 millimeter. And what are the problems that we can encounter? So suppose if we don't have any response at all, that is bad. Or if we are having more than 3 follicles, that can lead to multiple pregnancy as well as ovarian hyperstimulation. We don't want that either. And sometimes we will be faced in our clinical practice with a thin endometrium, an inadequate luteal phase defect, and inadequate ovulation. So we'll talk to you about like how are we going to deal with all these problems. So basically, before we go to the stimulation protocols, the first thing we have to have in mind is what are the things that we need to consider. So one and the first and foremost important thing is age of the patient. Never forget this, and always take time to go through the patient notes and check like what the response was to the previous cycles. Sometimes the patient would not have responded to letrozole 5 milligrams. Then there is no point in again restarting it. And then consider the ovarian reserve markers and also the BMI of the patient before considering the dose. And majority of our patients will have a good response with our standard protocols, but some of them like they might not respond, and those people, some of them might hyper respond as well, and for them we have to tailor the protocols. So what are the various stimulation protocols that we have in IUI cycle is clomiphene citrate, letrozole, clomid with gonadotropins, gonadotropins only, agonist with gonadotropins, or antagonist with gonadotropins. So starting with clomiphene citrate. So it has been in use for the past so many years, and its main mode of action is to increase the pituitary LH and FSH to promote the follicular growth. So clomid function just induces the follicular growth, but not the ovulation. So what causes ovulation? Hello? Slide view. Okay. ఇది ఎలా ఉంది? రీడింగ్ వ్యూ ఉంది. ఓకే, జస్ట్ 1 minute. ఇప్పుడు బెటరా?
No, madam, you can continue as per previous one only. No, we are not able to, it's not moving slides actually.
The slides you are not able to see?
Previously it was okay, madam, fine. Please
Now?
continue same thing. Now only we have seen the home, like, initial page, no IVF stimulation protocol for
Okay,
IVF.
I'll just change. Just 1 minute, I'm just sorting this out. Is this better? Bhargav?
No, madam, we are unable to see the slides.
You're unable to see the slides. Just 1 minute.
The screen is not shared, madam.
ఇది షేర్ కావట్లేదు. sharing till now? Yeah, కొంచెం bits is shared. దాని తర్వాత it is not shared. Are you able to see now?
No, madam.
No, in this. Is it better
Yes,
now?
madam. Yes, madam. Done. Please continue.
So, clomiphene citrate is a wonderful drug, and we have been using it for the past 40 years. And the mode of action is to increase the pituitary LH and FSH to promote the follicular growth. The main thing about this is it induces follicular growth, but it does not induce ovulation. So it is the follicle itself which induces ovulation through a positive estrogen feedback, which is because it induces a surge in the luteinizing hormone. So this is the mechanism of action of clomiphene citrate that I was talking to you about. And the standard protocols, like usually we start off with 50 milligram. So we can start any day between day 3 to day 5, or day 3 to usually between day 2 to day 5 of the cycle. And what is the dose of the clomiphene that we need to use, and which day we need to start, and what is the duration of the treatment, and how do you manage clomiphene failures? So we'll go through this step by step. So clomiphene always start at a lower dose and increase it every month if anovulation persists. But if there is anovulation with 100 milligram, don't persist with the dose, increase the dose by another 50 milligram. But most ovulation occur by a dose of 150 milligram for 5 days. So, and if the weight is, if the woman is less than 45 kg, use like 25 milligram per day. And if she is more than 75 kg, start off with 100 milligram per day. So when do you know that the dose is not working? So when you have an unsatisfactory response, when there is a prolonged follicular phase or a deficient luteal phase, then you know that the dose that you're giving is suboptimal. Then we have to increase the dose in the next cycle. So clomiphene citrate, usually we start between day 2 to day 5 of the cycle, and there is no apparent advantage when we increase the dose by more than 150 milligram. So, and usually what they say is, according to the RCOG, 6 ovulatory cycles are recommended. According to the Dutch study, no pregnancies after 7 cycles they have seen, and majority of the pregnancies, like 75% of the pregnancies, occur in the first 3 cycles. So when you call it as clomiphene failure, when there is like anovulation with the maximum dose, or when clomiphene, like when we have side effects like thin endometrium or failure of follicles to rupture. So coming to letrozole, it is an aromatase inhibitor. So it is non-steroidal. The commonly used drugs in this group are letrozole. It blocks the conversion of androstenedione to estrogen. It is being used for the treatment of breast cancer in postmenopausal women. So what are the theoretical advantages of using aromatase inhibitors? They do not block the estrogen receptors. So because of this, there is no detrimental effect on the endometrium or the cervical mucosa. And now because of this, we can use letrozole in women who have thin endometrium with clomiphene. And because there is the negative feedback mechanism is not turned off, so you see less chance of multiple follicular development with letrozole compared to Clomid. So for ovarian stimulation, if you compare letrozole and Clomid, there is lower E2 levels and less number of follicles with letrozole compared to Clomid dose of 100 milligram. But if you take Clomid dose of 50 milligram, there is a similar effect of stimulation on the follicles, but endometrial thickness is maintained by letrozole despite much lower E2 levels. So letrozole, we can give the dose of 2.5 milligram per day. It can be increased to 5 milligram per day, or you can utilize and give it as 20 milligram as a single dose. The last thing, like giving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tablets is, So this is very, very useful in some patients who don't respond to Clomid 150 milligram, or some of the women, like you find they're not responding to Clomid or gonadotropins or letrozole and gonadotropins. You can use this step-up protocol of letrozole. So that is on day 2 or day 3, you can give 1 tablet of letrozole 2.5 milligram per day, increase it to 2.5 milligram BD, then 2.5 milligram TDS, and on the 4th day you give 1 tablet in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, 2 in the night. So by this, like we'll have, like in clomiphene resistant failures, you can try this, you get good response before going with higher dose of gonadotropins, or treating them as an ovulation and going to IVF cycles. So we can try this letrozole step-up protocol. So coming to Clomid with gonadotropins, or we can just use gonadotropins only. So always, before using gonadotropins, always counsel the patients, because the treatment is expensive and sometimes the patient might over-respond that we might need to cancel the cycle, or we might need to convert into an IVF cycle. So what are the various protocols that we use while we are using gonadotropins? One is a step-down protocol, another one is a step-up protocol. In a step-down protocol, we use high dose for the initial few days to recruit more follicles. And once the lot number of follicles are recruited, then you decrease the dose. The reason behind this is, like, sorry, even if the dose is so there is initial recruitment of follicles, and once the dose is reduced, only the larger follicles tend to grow. And what happens to the smaller follicles is they become atretic and undergo degeneration. And usually we follow the step-up protocol. So in this, the risk of hyperstimulation is low. So you always start with a lower dose, and dose is stepped up only if needed. And it is safer because it is lower risk of hyperstimulation and more useful for softer stimulation. And gonadotropins, see, either you can combine with Clomid or letrozole, or we can use like FSH or HMG. Usually when a woman is PCO, better to use FSH. If the woman is not a PCO patient, then you can use HMG as well. So you can, if you use combination of Clomid or letrozole with gonadotropins, the cost can be lesser compared to giving gonadotropins every day. So what is the usual dose of giving gonadotropins is FSH or HMG 75 international units. And when you are giving gonadotropins cycle, like, or in any cycle that you're using Clomid or anything, so usually better to do a scan on the 2nd or 3rd day to make sure that there is no follicular abscess. Then start on the, there are various protocols that we use. Clomid can be used from day 2 to day 5. Then we can use gonadotropins from day 3, day 5, day 7, and scan them on day 9 or day 8 to see how the response is. And main thing that we do is sonography. That is the most important thing that is required for monitoring the gonadotropin response. We also tell estradiol, but in day-to-day practice, our sonography gives lot of knowledge about the growth of the follicles. So what is adequate response? Suppose if you have 1 to 3 follicles of 10 millimeter or more, or when the estradiol is rising well, continue the same dose for 2 to 3 days and monitor. So a dose of 75 international units usually leads to development of 1 to 2 follicles unless the woman is very young. So what do you do when you are using gonadotropins and if there is poor response? But be very careful in increasing the dose. Whenever you are increasing the dose, increase it by 50%. Say for example, if you are giving a dose of 75 units, if the response is not good, increase by 37.5 units. Don't double it or triple at the same time. And for this reason, if you have a multiple dose pen, it is easy to titrate the dose and give it, because like you have to be very careful in increasing the dose, because sometimes you see sudden and explosive response once the threshold is crossed. So suppose if you're increasing the dose, give it for 3 days, then again rescan, keep scanning. Otherwise, like sometimes you will end up with hyperstimulation, or you have to convert your IUI cycles into an IVF cycle. So these are the combinations and permutations. There are loads. So either you can start off with 50 milligram of Clomid or letrozole 2.5 milligram. You can start with FSH and HMG either on alternate days, or like you can complete the course of Clomid or letrozole, then start gonadotrophins. So there are various combinations and permutations in using letrozole and clomiphene citrate along with gonadotrophins. So these are the regimens: clomid, letrozole followed by gonadotrophins, or clomid and letrozole with gonadotrophins. And action of both of them is complementary. It is very difficult to titrate. So start with softer stimulation. There's no standard guidelines, but monitor carefully. So whenever you feel that there is a risk of hyperstimulation, you can decrease the dose, monitor the patient, and then titrate accordingly. And as I told you, the sonography is the main form of monitoring. Always do a baseline scan, and after 5 days of stimulation, always do a scan, and always measure the follicle number, size, and endometrial thickness accurately. And estradiol, as I told you, even in an IVF cycles nowadays, we are not routinely using to increase or decrease the doses, but we can use it in gonadotrophin cycles. Main thing is, if it is rising very high, we know that the woman might end up in hyperstimulation. Ideal rise would be, it should be by 30 to 50% per day. So what is the trigger timing? So the follicle, whenever the follicle reaches 17 to 20 millimeter, or the endometrium is more than 8 millimeter, then we do the trigger. But the IUI time, the recent guideline told, like usually we do between 36 to 38 hours. But the recent ESHRE guideline, what it told is like right from the time of HCG trigger to ovulation. So we can do it from 0 to 36 hours, we can do it at any time. It doesn't really matter is what it says. And what are the various triggers that we use? One is HCG or recombinant HCG we can use, or we can use GnRH agonist trigger as well. So the HCG usually dose is 5,000 units. It can be increased to 10,000 units, and ovulation occurs like 36 to 40 hours later. The HCG has got a long half-life. The advantage of this is it gives a good luteal phase support. The disadvantage of this is if you have more follicles and if you trigger, then you might end up with hyperstimulation. So the GnRH analog trigger, so the time interval between GnRH analog as well as ovulation is same as with HCG. So it is got a luteolytic effect. So because of this, if you are continuing the cycle, you have to give a proper luteal phase support. Otherwise, you will have lot of negative cycles. This we have to have in mind. And this has got shorter duration of action, lower risk of hyperstimulation, and 100% if you are using a GnRH analog as an ovulation trigger, your luteal phase support should be good. And do you need to give luteal phase support in all the patients who are undergoing ovulation induction or IUI? Suppose if the woman is undergoing clomiphene citrate or letrozole, there is no need for any luteal phase support. But only when you think there is a luteal phase deficiency suspected, or if you are we are having a woman with an ovulation, then better to give a luteal phase support. Usually we give micronized progesterone 200 milligram to 200 milligram OD to 200 milligram BD. Usually we don't give HCG luteal phase support because of the risk of hyperstimulation. And IUI results. So another trick for IUI is, if you use in a natural cycle, if you are going to do an IUI, your chances of success is going to be very less. So if you cannot just compare results with other centers. Suppose if you are doing natural cycle IUI, then your chances of success will be 8% per cycle. If you are going for clomiphene or letrozole, your chances of success would be 10 to 12%. Suppose if you are going for gonadotrophin, then your chances of success would be 12 to 16%. So, and one thing that we have to have in mind is, while doing an IUI, the maximum success rate is in the first 3 cycles. So do a proper IUI with all the semen analysis and everything. And because the first best success rate is in the first 3 cycles. And from 4th cycle onwards, it's better to discourage the woman and to undergo IUI, and better to counsel them to go for IVF. So this is the end of the first talk. Sholo? Come. So now I'll share you the next talk. So the next topic for today, if you have any questions, we can take it now or we can take it after the end of the this talk as well. So now we'll be talking to you about the stimulation protocols for the IVF cycle. So see, when the first IVF cycle was done, it was done in a natural cycle. Since then, we have come a long way. So before they used to have only one follicle developing in a natural cycle, and we might get an egg in that cycle or we might not get egg in the cycle. So ovarian stimulation is very, very important in doing an IVF cycles. The reason and behind this is to get more number of oocytes so that we can have better embryos and choose the best embryo to give the better success rates for our patients in their first attempt only. So what are the issues that we'll be discussing today is, one is the prevention of untimely LH surge. It can be done by an agonist as well as an antagonist or optimal stimulation. One is recombinant versus urinary or FSH versus HMG, and what is the starting dose of the medication that we need to give. So coming to the prevention of untimely LH surge. So the GnRH action, all of us know, it is synthesized by the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus. It is released in a pulsatile manner. This in turn stimulates FSH and LH production from the anterior pituitary. So initially when we give an GnRH, there is a flare leading to release of FSH and LH. This is how we use the flare cycles. But if you do continuous administration, there is no endogenous FSH and LH. So this is the flow diagram. So first when you administer GnRH analog, there is an upregulation. This causes an increase in the FSH and LH, causing the flare effect. But if you continue to give the GnRH analogs, then it leads to continuous administration. Then this in turn causes internalization of the agonist receptor complex and a decrease in the number of receptors, causing downregulation. And there is a paradoxical suppression of pituitary gonadotrophin synthesis and liberation, leading to desensitization. So based upon this, we base our protocols. So in an agonist cycle, so in any cycle like an agonist or an antagonist cycle, ideally it's better to do a scan on the day 2 of the cycle, usually like to make sure that the endometrium
Your
thickness
voice is not audible properly, madam.
Is it better now?
No, madam, somewhat less only.
Okay, wait just 1 minute. I'll say this again. Is it better now?
I think no difference, ma'am.
No difference. Okay, I don't know what to do.
In your laptop, you have to increase the volume, I think, ma'am.
Okay. That 100 now.
Yes, ma'am.
Is better now?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, thank you.
Okay, fine. Thanks. So I'll just repeat this. So whenever you're doing an antagonist cycle, or an agonist cycle, always the baseline scan is important on day 2 to day 3. So on that day, if you measure in an agonist cycle, day 2 FSH and LH, they will be in the lower range compared to when you are using in an antagonist cycle, because the FSH hormones and LH hormones are not suppressed. These endogenous levels contribute to the gonadotrophin pool in poor responders. Okay, so what are the advantages of antagonist is, the antagonist cycle, nowadays we are having shorter duration of treatment and we are using lesser dose of gonadotrophins, and the minute you stop it, it is rapidly reversible. And before we used to think, oh, is it useful in poor responders? But in nowadays, because we are extremely used to this antagonist cycle, the women are responding well. And we can prevent almost our hypostimulation rate is almost 0 with the antagon cycles, because we can give a GnRH agonist as an ovulation trigger. So how do we do a GnRH antagonist stimulation? So GnRH antagonist, so usually from the previous cycle, you can start on day 21 of the cycle, or if you miss that and if the patient come on day 2 to day 3 of menstrual cycle, even then also we can use GnRH agonist trigger. But ideally we start from the previous cycle. Then once the women get the period, so the women come to us on day 2 or day 3 of the cycle. Then we check the FSH, LH, E2, P4. If we think if they are in the normal or low levels, then the dose of GnRH agonist can be reduced, because the down regulation will continue. Then once the hormones are good, you will continue the GnRH agonist throughout the cycle until the day of the trigger. So usually that will be between day 10 to day 11. Then the gonadotrophins will start from day 2 of the cycle right up till when the follicle is between 17 to 21. So first you start on the day 21. If you miss day 21, we can start on the day 2 or day 3 of the cycle also. Once if you think they are adequately down regulated, then you can decrease the dose of GnRH agonist. Then from the second or third day, you can start gonadotrophins until the final day of the trigger. Then in the that was a long protocol. So this is a long protocol, and GnRH agonist short protocol. Here again you do a baseline scan to make sure that there is no follicular cyst and rule out pregnancy by making sure that the endometrium is thin. And we start the GnRH agonist on the second day of the menstrual cycle. The next day later we'll start the gonadotrophins. So we don't start before, so that there is no that much down regulation in this. And again, once like you give 10 to 11 days of medications, majority of the patients are ready. Then we plan, give a trigger, then plan for oocyte pickup. And next, coming to GnRH antagonist, multiple dose fixed protocol. So what do you do in a GnRH antagonist cycle? So again, the day 2 is very, very important. You do the baseline scan, you do your E2, P4 hormones. If they are normal, then right away we can start off the gonadotrophins. Usually the dose of gonadotrophins that we give is between 10 to 11 days. Then we call them for scan after 5 days of giving gonadotrophins. Then what happens? You check for the follicular size. Usually in a flexible protocol, we start an antagonist when the size of the follicle is 14 millimeter. But in a multiple dose fixed protocol, we, whatever the size, start the GnRH antagonist 0.25 micrograms right from the day 6 of the cycle, after 5 days of stimulation. On the day 6 of stimulation, you start your fixed dose antagon. So nowadays during the COVID regimen, you don't want women to be coming and going. So better to use this fixed days protocol. So like day 6, you can start off the antagon without measuring the follicle size also. So once the follicle reaches 17 to 21. So usually the criteria is at least 3 follicles should be reaching between 17 to 21. You give an HCG trigger, or if you think there is a risk of hyperstimulation, you give an agonist trigger. So then after 34 to 36 hours later, you plan for oocyte pickup. Then 3 to 5 days later, you plan your embryo transfer. So in a multiple dose means you are giving multiple doses of antagonist, but starting from the 6th day for all patients is GnRH antagonist multiple dose fixed protocol. So if you go for flexible protocol, if it is GnRH antagonist multiple dose flexible protocol, what do? Again do the scan. Again after 5 days of stimulation you start your scan. But you will be starting only when the follicle is 14 millimeter. So if the follicle if the size is 14 millimeter on day 6, you start off your antagonist. But if it is not, if it is only 11 millimeter, you have to rescan them, and only when the follicle is more than 14 millimeter, then you give your antagon cycle. The rest HCG, OPU and ET are the same. It is just the start dose of the antagon is the difference between the fixed and the flexible protocol. So the starting dose again, like in an IUI cycle, we'll be checking with the age, the antral follicle, the AMH, this and the BMI. These are the 4 important things that we have to decide. Because if you are going to get your dose wrong, and majority of them respond to normal doses, then your stimulation and the number of oocytes or the mature oocytes that you get will be less. Okay, and always consider the risk factors for OHSs. This we all would be aware, like previous OHSs, a woman with polycystic ovaries, or when the serum AMH is more than 15 picomoles per liter, or in a young patient, or in a woman who is very thin, will have a risk for hyperstimulation. So coming to the next thing, we just thought we'll add this slide. The reason is, does ethnicity matter in ovarian reserve? There was a study by the EV group. What they did was they compared the ovarian reserve markers in Indian women and also in Caucasian women, more specifically in the Spanish population. So what did they find? So what they found was the ovarian reserve markers or even the response to ovarian stimulation in Indian women was worse compared to a woman of the Caucasian population or the Spanish woman. So for example, if our ovarian reserve or stimulation of a 30-year-old woman as 30-year-old Indian woman is similar to that 36-year-old woman. So when I worked in UK, like at 35, 36 years, we used to think the ovarian reserve is good. But here nowadays we see even in the age of 27, 28, the ovarian reserve is getting lower and lower. We don't know whether it is the genes or the pollution or the stress or whatever this is causing. So always like don't think, okay, this patient is only 27, let us do more and more cycles of IUI. This we have to have in mind, and always do or check their ovarian reserve. If it is good, yeah, fine, that's fine. They can at least postpone it for a few months, for an year or so. But if it is less, better they start planning for the pregnancy before. So that's what they told. This helped clinician to counsel infertile women who undergo assisted reproduction technology according to the means there is a variation in the response based upon the age and ethnic background also. And unfortunately, us Indian women are in the receiving end. So the antral follicle count is very easy. We can do it in our own hospital. So there is no need for us to send to the lab and rely on the lab for the results. So this is very important. So on the day 2, compulsory do the antral follicle. So by this, one thing what we will know, like, okay, what is the ovarian reserve of this patient? How many oocytes are you going to expect? From this, how many embryos are you going to expect? So this you will know by the antral follicle count, and will also plan. So always when you get the oocytes, go back and check what was the number of follicles on the day of the trigger and what was your antral follicle count. Go retrospectively and try to match and see like whether you are checking it correctly and whether you are able to correlate or not. So while measuring the antral follicle count, when the antral follicles are less than 4, then the response is very poor, or there is no response. Or when there is antral follicle count is 5 to 11, there is low response, there might be a cancellation rate. And ideal response is the antral follicle count of 12 to 20. And over response, like more than 20 antral follicles, who might end up with hyperstimulation. So AMH is very important again, like after antral follicle count, AMH is very, very important. It is secreted by the granulosa cells, as we all know. And it is very important is this hormone is a regulator of recruitment. So it doesn't allow our body to recruit all the follicles at one time. So thereby preventing the depletion of all primordial pool at once. So the AMH levels go down dramatically with age. And it can be, we can check the AMH level at any time of the menstrual cycle because there is not much variation in the AMH levels. And this is a study done by Sunkara et al. So what it says is if we have like at least 8 to 14 eggs, it leads to an optimal egg collection and a good success rates in your IVF cycle. So we don't want less eggs or we don't want too many eggs. So optimum we should be measuring, we should be aiming between 8 to 14. So what is our goal? So if we have obviously less number of eggs, then the chances of cumulative pregnancy rate go down. So if you have at least like 8 to 14 number of eggs, the cumulative pregnancy rate goes up because at least we can transfer 2 in the first cycle, or in very young patients we can transfer 1 and we can pool the other embryos for the next cycle. So the more number of eggs we get, the more is the cumulative pregnancy rate. So the woman with poor ovarian reserve is going to have a lesser pregnancy rate. Having said that, we have seen like women with very less ovarian reserve, especially younger women with 1 antral follicle getting 1 egg and having a healthy child. So this, as we told you, like antagonist cycle, treatment starts on day 2. So the standard dose that we can use is 2 to 5 in regular responders. So start on day 2, and depending upon whether you are using a flexible or fixed days antagon cycle, you will start the antagon. So usually the number of antagonists that we use might range from 3 to 5. And once the follicle becomes 17-21, we go for egg pickup. And if you have more than 19 follicles, you got high chance of developing hyperstimulation. And if you are using an antagonist cycle, better to give an agonist trigger in these patients. So for regular responders, if you want, you can give a, I'll just go to the previous cycle. So this is same. So for regular responders, we can use HCG trigger. And if you think they're hyper responding, we can give triptorelin or decapeptyl HGnRH agonist trigger to prevent hyperstimulation. So again, because they are regular responders, we are still on the dose of 2 to 5. So patient at risk of OHSS, decrease the dose to 150 and again go for a antagonist cycle. So patients at risk of OHSS, it is always better to freeze the embryos, and nowadays we can freeze the eggs also. Before we were worried that oocyte vitrification was not that great compared to embryo vitrification, but we can see from this study done by Velasco et al. And that was published in RBM online that the success rates after oocyte vitrification and embryo vitrification nowadays is almost same. So starting dose, if the woman is less than 30 years, we can give a dose of 200 international units of Ricagon or 187.5 of Gonal-f or 225 of Humog. And if the woman is between 31 to 35, you can add another drug, like with 200 units of Ricagon, add 75 units of Menopur or Humog or Menatos. And for Gonal-f, you can increase it to 225 plus 75 And we can increase the dose of gonadotropin 225 to 300 to 450 because of the age group. More than 35 years, better to go for 450 units. And if you are using a recombinant FSH, we can go for 225 plus 225. Or if you are using only HMG, we can just go for 450. And PCBO, very thin patients use 150 international units. And if the woman is more than 30 years PCBO patient, we can use just 200 units of Ricagon or 187.5 international units of Gonal-F. So first scan you do after 5 days of stimulation. Usually we can adjust the dose at that time, and you can decide like whether when you are going to start the antagonist. But ideally what we say is don't alter the dose of medication in between. So you get the dose right in the start only, so that there is no, we are not like manipulating after few days. So the antagonist, the dose is 0.25 milligrams subcutaneously daily. As I told you, like in a flexible protocol, we use when the follicle size is more than 14 millimeter. And in a fixed days protocol, whatever the size, we start on day 6 of the stimulation. So when we have to give antagonist every day until the day of the trigger. So what we have to remember is from the time of the trigger to the last dose of the antagon should not be more than 24 hours. Suppose if it is more than 24 hours, suppose if you decide that you're going to trigger the patient today, and after 36 hours you're going to do a you're going to trigger, then the difference between the last dose of antagon and your trigger should not be more than 24 hours. If it is more than 24 hours, please give another dose of antagon. Otherwise, sometimes the follicles can release early. Normally, we need only 3 to 5 doses. So this is basically algorithm. So on day 2 of the cycle, do a transvaginal scan, then we start the gonadotropins. Then day 6, you have do a transvaginal scan. Whether you need to adjust the dose, we can do it, but it is rarely required. And start the GnRH antagonist. Then start monitoring. Usually by day 10 we are ready, and we should be giving a trigger when the lead follicles, when there are more than 3 of them, that is the trigger criteria. And so that's what here also we say, ensure interval between antagonist and HCG does not exceed, like we say, with more than 24 hours. And you can give HCG dose of 5,000 to 10,000. Usually we can give a recombinant HCG, Ovitril, that's what we give. And plan for egg recovery 34 to 36 hours later. So what is for the regular IVF patients, this is the things that we see, or like 5 to 9 antral follicles per ovary. The age should be less than 35 years, no history of PCO, no history of poor response, and no endometriosis. And there is no need to treat all the patients on OCP. It is not needed, and LH is not needed. So luteal phase support. So after egg pickup, when do you start your luteal phase? So you can start any time from the evening of the egg pickup to the day 3 post pickup as well. So we start our luteal phase support. Suppose in the morning if they have egg pickup, we start from the evening. But even if you miss 1 or 2 days, it doesn't matter. We can start from until day 3 post pickup. You can start your luteal phase support. Usually we give micronized progestogen 400 milligram twice a day, along with dufaston 10 milligram twice a day. If you want to give injections, IM injections, we can give 50 milligram of progestogens. Or if you are giving subcutaneous, you can give 25. You can give gel as well. So usually this is the protocol that we give. And when do you do the pregnancy test? After the embryo transfer? After 14 days post ET, you do the embryo transfer. Sorry, you do the HCG. If the value is more than 100, that's fine. You give them a date for follow-up scan. And if the dose is if the value is between 10 to 100, we ask them to repeat after 48 hours. And if it is less than 10, we consider as a negative report. And now coming to donor recipient cycles. So when a woman is going for oocyte donation, we have to match the donor recipient. But suppose if there is a scarcity of us getting donors, sometimes there is no option but to freeze the embryos. So for donor, usually we start from the day 2 of the stimulation. So there is little flexibility for changing the day of OPU. So you cannot, so don't try to manipulate the donor's dates. So recipient, they have got large window for us to manipulate. So we can change the recipient window, and we can plan to have the recipient ready on the day for the, suppose the endometrium of the recipient should be ready on the day of the pickup of the donor. So donor screening, nowadays we do COVID screening recently. Then we have to check suitability for anesthesia. We have to counsel the patients. Then the ovarian reserve should be checked. And the recipient suitability for pregnancy, any contraindications to pregnancy should be noted. And endometrial receptivity, with experience, I think we can do majority of the treatment cycles without a mock cycle. But whenever you have a doubt, always do a mock cycle. It doesn't harm the patient. So sometimes to match, we can put them both on the oral contraceptive pills and try to get the periods for both of them at the similar time. Donor, always 100% go for an antagonist cycle and always give an agonist trigger. Don't give an HCG trigger at all. And recipient, if she's having periods, we can suppress them. But if the patient is with premature ovarian failure, there's no need to suppress anyway. So always the recipient get ready before the donor. So for the recipient, how do you prepare the recipient? So on day 2 of the cycle, if they're having regular cycles, you start with 2 milligram twice a day for 4 days and 4 milligram twice a day, then scan after 7 to 8 days to make sure that the endometrium is more than 8 millimeter. Suppose if the endometrium is suboptimal, increase the dose of Progenova by 2 milligram, maximum up to 12 milligram per day, and continue until the day of the thing. And luteal phase support from whenever that, so once the recipient, the endometrium is ready, wait for the day of the pickup of the donor. From the evening of the donor's pickup day, you start the luteal phase support. And always once you have started Progenova, continue the Progenova. And the same thing, like we use micronized progesterone 400 milligram twice a day, along with Dufaston 10 milligram twice a day. And ET we can plan 3 to 5 days later. So with poor responders, GnRH antagonist, you increase the dose of 300 units. And here in poor responders, we can do pooling. Suppose if they get 1 egg, in the next cycle collect 1 more eggs, and we can pool the cycles. That is the reason why here an agonist trigger is there. But if we have like 2 to 3 follicles, we can just straight away give a HCG trigger and transfer them in that cycle. And like clomifene citrate, we hardly use it. So we can, in poor responders, here what we do is, we can do pre-treatment with estrogens in the prior cycle. And then once you get the period, we can start them on clomifene citrate and gonadotrophins. And once the follicle is good size, then we give an antagonist as well to prevent ovulation. Then again the pickup is same. And there was a study by Labata et al. From Spain. What they told is which is better in poor responder patient, whether the conventional protocol is better or whether minimal ovarian stimulation protocol is better. According to this study, what he told is in women in poor responders women, according to the Bologna criteria. What is this criteria? The older woman, or if you have like less number of follicles, like less than 3 oocytes in your previous IVF cycles, or if your ovarian reserve markers are very bad, then you go into this poor category in the Bologna criteria. So in this poor responders, what he said is like comparing minimal stimulation with controlled normal stimulation, he said they got better fertilized oocytes, good quality embryos in minimal stimulation. And the best response for poor responders is egg donation. Majority of them conceive with egg donation. And there are various protocols under the earth to see which is beneficial for poor responders. FLAIR protocol, STOCK protocol, whether giving DHEA, testosterone, letrozole. but the evidence is less. We need much more evidence to routinely use them for regular practice. And does prayer influence the success rate? Yeah, people did study on this as well. And one group probably think they are more relaxed, and the positive attitude is maybe helping them. So when you compare the live birth rate and the ovarian aging, the live birth rate dramatically falls after the age of 38 years, and the miscarriage rate again goes up. And with age, our odds of having a healthy child goes down as well. And oocyte quality and age are beyond repair, so we have to fully counsel the patient, and we have to be very, very specific to the patient. Like we get a 48-year-old saying that, no, I'm going to go with my own eggs. So you have to explain them what the chances of them having a pregnancy are. So there is, in poor responders, there is really no effective treatment for the poor responder. You cannot stimulate follicles that are in there. So not every patient is the same. So you have to tailor your protocols according to the patients. And this is again the study saying the optimal fertility, and after the age of 30, the fertility becomes coming down. And after the age of 42, 43, it becomes the end of fertility. Here you reach irregular cycles, reaching menopause. So this is again another study saying the dramatic fall in the number of oocytes. And at 40 years old, 77% of the oocytes are aneuploid. And this you have to mention to the patients. If a 42-year-old come, their live birth rate is 4.2%. And if a 44-year-old come, their chance of live birth rate is 0.6%. So this we have to counsel the patient, and we have to encourage them to go for oocyte donation. Obviously, if they're not willing to go for oocyte donation, we can go for PGTA, pre-implantation genetic testing for aneuploidy. We have had a 44-year-old with a beautiful embryo. Like we had 4 embryos. That was a good response for a 44-year-old. And out of the 4 embryos, only 1 was good. And she always brings her beautiful daughter along whenever she comes to the clinic. Thank you.
Ma'am, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Is there a maximum dose UN protocol to FSH use?
See, we don't go beyond 450 units.
In one cycle?
In one cycle, yeah. Means like 450 dose per day for obviously for 10 to 11 days. Usually, even if we go beyond 450, we don't see much better response. I have seen patients with 600, 750 in some centers, but I don't see beyond, I don't go beyond 450, because after that the response become plateaued.
450 in a day, you are saying?
Yeah, for an IVF cycle.
No, I'm talking about IUI protocol.
No.
Maximum dose in a cycle?
In an IUI cycle, usually with
in a cycle?
See, in an IUI cycle, we ideally for majority of the patients, they respond with 75 units, and majority will respond with 3 injections of 75 units. If you give along with Clomid or Letrozole, very rarely we see them taking up to 5 injections. So 75, yeah, 75 into 3 doses is the optimum response. If they don't respond in that cycle, then we can increase it to 150. And beyond 150, I don't do in an IUI cycle.
Per day, okay.
Madam,
normal
the day
dose,
of
levels, ma'am?
day,
level, what normal dose level we should take?
Sorry?
Estradiol level, E2 level?
In an IUI cycle or in an IVF cycle?
IUI cycle, ma'am.
See, in an IUI cycle, there is no need to measure E2 levels in a normal IUI cycle. Okay. The reason is like on day 2, always ideally I tell everybody to do a scan, day 2 to day 3. And if there is no cyst or anything, in majority of the patients, your E2 is going to be normal. But if you find a cyst, and if the woman is insisting that we have to start the IUI cycle in that cycle only, then you do an E2 test. Okay. Then if the E2 is less than 100, then it is just a non-secreting, it's non-hormonal cyst. you can start off your stimulation. In the next scan, you can see the cyst size going down as well. And if the E2 levels, when you have a cyst is more than 100, then better not to do in that cycle because that is an E2 secreting cyst.
Okay. Ma'am. Yes, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
When should we give GMH in an IUS cycle? Starting from day 3, or you can tailor to from day 7 or 8, like that, 7, 8, 9.
See, suppose if you are giving a combination, so what
Yeah,
we give
with
is like
CC or letrozole.
Yeah. So with
When should we
CC or
start up the GMH?
ideally, I feel better that we start from day 3 or day 2. Suppose if the patient come on day 3, you start suppose this is a first cycle on gonadotropins, I just give only 2 injections. So what we do is like day 2 or day 3 we do a scan. From day 2 or day 3 you start your Clomid or letrozole. So suppose if this is her first cycle and if she's an youngish patient, what I do, I give like 75 units on the 5th day and the 7th day, and I call them for scan on the 9th day to see how the response is. If the response is good, then I don't give anything. But if it is still small, like 13 to 14 millimeter, I give another dose on 9th day and call them for scan on the 11th day to see how the response is. Suppose in the previous cycle, if you have only one follicle, then I slightly make it to day 3, day 5, day 7, I give them and call them for scan on 9th day. And if your response is less, as I told you, like if you're taking longer for the follicle to develop, next cycle increase to 150 on the day 3, day 5, day 7.
So, okay. Thank you. And then, ma'am, in IUS cycle, you prefer CC or letrozole? Which is the most preferred?
And nowadays we are using letrozole lot.
Letrozole only.
Yeah,
Okay.
because you are very comfortable because not many patients hyperstimulate and you don't get more than 2-3 follicles. So you can continue and complete of that cycle. And if you're using like Clomid, sometimes for me the endometrium is very thin and the follicle is big. Or sometimes you have like many follicles developing. So nowadays more so of letrozole though.
Okay. And madam, in PCOS cases, with a more BMI, like more than 25, do you like to start off FSH straight away 150, or we'll start with 75 and then slowly the next cycle you increase the dose? Depending upon the BMI.
So BMI, if she's normal BMI, go for 75.
If she's obese, around 75 to 80 kg, like that.
Yeah, 150.
So straight away you can start off 150.
No. See, even though they're obese, I better like the first cycle go with 75. You might fail, but that at least relieves the risk of hyperstimulation.
And then in that case also you should start off from the 3rd day.
Yeah. And that is like,
and then you continue depending upon the your follicular study, you have to give the number of doses.
Yes. And this is like if you are using in combination. If you are using gonadotropins only.
No, we always use in combination. So that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So we have to start with 75 from day 3 and then go up to how many injections, madam, roughly?
Like depending upon how you are doing the scan, no? Suppose like what I do, if I'm starting from day 3, day 5, day 7, if the follicle is almost 16 or 17, then anyway, by next day she will be ready. But if the follicle is still like 12, 13, then you have to give 2 more injections. That's how I take it.
Okay.
So approximately the thumb rule is the follicle grow 2 millimeter per day.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So if you know like 13 millimeter, 15 millimeter, 17, 19, then today you give one dose, next day after tomorrow you give one dose and do a scan.
Okay. Maximum you can go up to 5 injections sometimes.
Yeah. Usually majority will respond with 3 injections and some like the rest of them with 5 injections.
5 injections. Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Anything else?
Ma'am, can you show me the induction protocol slide, ma'am?
In an IUI or IVF?
IUI, ma'am.
One minute.
Okay.
You are able to see now, no, the slides?
No, ma'am.
Okay, wait 1 minute.
No, madam, kindly share the screen.
Yeah. Even now you are not able to see?
No, ma'am.
Just 1 minute, give me time.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
For for which patients will give HMG injection, like indication?
So if you are a PCO patient, I'll go with IUI with PCO with FSH injections, madam. And if you are like a non-PCO patient, I go with HMG.
Okay.
PCO patient FSH, madam.
If a PCO patient, go for FSH. Yeah, they respond better.
Okay, 3 to 5 doses.
Yeah.
HMG normal patients, madam.
Normal patients, you can just go for HMG, madam.
Okay.
Thank you.
With letrozole.
With letrozole, yes. If you're not using letrozole, then every day you have to use 37.5. But in an IUI cycles, it become expensive. Hello?
Madam, what is the role of other micronutrients, madam, in IUI cycle besides this, the CC and letrozole?
Madam, we can give it, but there's no harm. And even if it helps little bit also, we don't mind. But we don't give like 2 or 3 or anything. Just we also ask them to have a balanced diet sort of thing.
And then like vitamin D3 and all, madam, do you suggest for IUI cycle?
Yeah. See, vitamin D3, like any infertility patients, is always better to check, madam. Check your vitamin D levels. If it is low, always supplement vitamin D.
For every cycle, you're supposed to supplement?
And madam, if the vitamin D levels are low, supplement. If they are normal,
otherwise there is no need.
Otherwise, there is no need to supplement.
Hello, madam.
Yeah, tell ma'am.
If the IUI catheter is blood stain, what is the success rate, ma'am?
Means why is it blood stain? That's what first thing we have to ask. Like is
and how to prevent it, ma'am? Better.
Yeah. So that's what first we have to think. Why is it blood stain? So is it because you are using a harder catheter? So suppose in your practice, if you are using harder catheter, better to change it to a softer version of the IUI catheter so that it is less traumatic.
Okay, ma'am.
That is number 1 rule. And always don't force things. Suppose like when you're checking the scan only, you will know whether the uterus is anteverted or retroverted. Like in majority of the patients, you don't have problem. So like, you know, like on the day of the trigger, like day after tomorrow, they'll be coming for IUI. So, you know, like if it is anteverted, like just go with that. Or if you still have problem, then do it under ultrasound guidance. So that it's much easier. With a half-filled bladder, again, it is much easier to do a IUI.
Okay.
This somehow I'm not able to share. Yeah, ma'am.
Ma'am, L-arginine. What is the role of L-arginine in infertility patients? Shall we are or not?
Madam, all this or like what they say is helpful, but there's no like concrete evidence saying that it is 100% useful or 100% not useful. So it's all empirical treatment only, madam.
Okay. What is the selection of madam? Is it give or not?
No need, madam. When you're using the normal healthy diet and normal thing, there no need for supplementation of L-arginine or anything.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Madam, if you get
I have asked.
I know. I'm trying. Just 1 minute. I'm doing your thing only. I don't know why I'm not able to share.
Okay, ma'am.
Just 1 minute.
Madam, if you get 2 or 3 good follicles of good size, but if the ET is poor, so for the IUI.
Can you please repeat the question?
If you stimulate the patient for IUI and if you get good follicles, but suppose if the ET is low, means thin, around 6 or 7, So should we proceed for IUI or should we cancel that cycle?
Madam, see, first of all, why is it thin? So is it genuinely thin? Because whether so first thing is, are we using Clomid or not? If you are using Clomid, sometimes the drug itself can cause thinness.
Anti-estrogenic.
So, anti-estrogenic. Another thing is, like, before we start an IUI cycle or an IVF cycle, we would have scanned the patient previously. When the first patient comes to us, at that time, if the endometrium was good and now it is thin, then we know whether it is a medication that is causing the problem. So even first time when the patient comes to you, it is thin, then is there a problem? Is there like fibrosis, or is there any tuberculosis or Asherman's or anything that we have to think about it? So suppose, so that is one thing we have to think. Suppose if you think genuinely there is a problem, then better to do a hysteroscopy, sort the problem out and start an IUI cycle. But if you think it is Clomid only, then we can change it to letrozole next time. And if it is only little bit and the follicle is 16 to 17, sometime I put estradiol, madam. Progenova.
Okay. Progenova from which day, madam?
No, madam. Like, don't put, the main trick about starting Progenova is if you start before the follicle is 14 millimeter or not. This shade. If you start before 14 millimeter, then your follicle growth will not be great.
Madam, screen already shared.
Okay. Okay.
It's only so.
Yeah. This is what you want. This one.
Hello.
Hello.
Madam, one question.
So you want
Madam?
to see this slide, or is it a different slide?
This only, madam.
Okay, tell.
I will take a screenshot.
Okay. Yeah, take.
Madam, one
Madam,
question.
you were
Madam.
telling about Progenova something. You stopped.
Yeah, madam. Progenova. See, and if the follicle is like 16 millimeter, 17 millimeter, if the endometrium is 6 only in that cycle, then you can start Progenova 2 milligram BD and until the day of the trigger and see how it is. But the problem is never start Progenova before the follicle is 14 millimeter, madam, because your follicles will not grow.
Okay. And what about Cetaphyllin, madam? Use of Cetaphyllin?
Not routinely in an IUI cycle.
IUI cycle. Okay.
No
need.
No need.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Madam.
Yes, madam, please.
Yeah. Carry on.
Madam, one question. Madam, if a patient is on stimulation and egg is follicle is growing and along with the endometrium is also good, but only thing is it is homogeneous. Does it signify something?
See, sometimes you see a clear pattern of triple layer endometrium, then it become homogeneous. Okay. So if you are seeing that change from a triple layer to a homogeneous layer, then it means the P4 is being secreted. It is going into the secretory phase. So you have to trigger before that. Or before only you didn't even see a triple layer in the whole of the thing. And if the endometrium is thicker, then you have to think whether there is hyperplasia or is there any polyp or anything.
Ma'am,
I think it's from the other end, the sounds. See, what I was telling was, if you see a triple layer endometrium and later becoming homogeneous. Hello?
Madam, I think you're on mute. Kindly please unmute and ask, madam.
ma'am.
So if the suppose if you have seen a beautiful triple layer and then later it is becoming homogeneous when the follicle is there, means you are triggering your trigger is late. Okay.
Ma'am. Yeah, ma'am.
So, but in from the beginning only you're not seeing a triple layer. There might be two things. One is like whether there is endometrial hyperplasia or anything, whether the endometrium is thick, or is there any polyp inside that we are missing also, we have to think.
Ma'am, it's like initially it is thin, but as the follicle is growing, it's becoming thick, but it is not triple layer.
Then, and there's no polyp or anything.
No.
Then I think if they don't fall pregnant, do a hysteroscopy to see if there is any problem like adhesions or anything inside the uterus.
Okay.
That cycle you carry on. I wouldn't say stop in between in an IUI cycle.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay.
And like one more question for unruptured luteinized follicle, like how do you diagnose and how do you manage the patient?
See, unruptured follicle is like one thing is like we have to see whether the common things are whether if the woman is on diclofenac or anything, you will not have a ruptured follicle. So make sure that she's not taking that for any other medication. And another thing is rule out endometriosis. Sometimes even subtle endometriosis, the follicle might not rupture. Or another third thing is like you can give gonadotropins and see whether the follicle ruptures. Or sometimes then if the follicle doesn't rupture, then you give like dual trigger. You give HCG 5000 units along with decapeptyl or any agonist basically. We give like HCG 5000 units or decapeptyl 0.1 milligram. Then that with that majority of the follicles will get released. Even
Like
then, if it doesn't get released, then go for IVF.
Okay. 2 can be given at the same time.
Yeah. It is helpful in majority of the unruptured follicles at the same time, one after the other.
Could you just repeat what you said just now?
Sorry?
Could you just repeat what you said just now?
Can you repeat it again, please, Dr. Swati? Can you repeat it again?
Madam, unable to hear your voice actually.
Can you hear me now?
Oh.
Yes.
Slightly better.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, you have 3 reasons for unruptured follicles. Could you please repeat it?
Okay. So one is if there is like any subtle endometriosis, that can be one of the reasons.
Okay.
Okay. Another thing is suppose if the woman is on like diclofenacs or any other drugs, that can be one of the reason for unruptured follicles. Or your stimulation is not good, then you start off with gonadotropin. Sometimes that can help in the rupture of the follicle. Or still if the follicle is not ruptured, then you can give a dual trigger, that is HCG with GnRH agonist together, one after the other at the same time.
Okay.
And after that also, if it is not released, then we have to go for IVF.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am.
Yeah, tell ma'am.
Why should we see the estradiol levels in day 2 and day 3?
Madam, in an IUI cycle, if there is no cyst, there is no need to do a E2 level.
Okay.
But only if there is a cyst and if you want to continue in that same cycle for an IUI, you have to do a E2. The reason being, we have to check whether it is a hormone secreting cyst or a simple cyst. Suppose if it is a hormone secreting cyst, your stimulation will not be good and the pregnancy rate will be less. So better to check the E2 only when there is a fall in cyst is there. If there is no cyst in an IUI cycle, absolutely no need to do a E2 level at all.
It's do only after scan, no, madam? Day 2 second.
Yeah, always scan, madam, will give you a much better idea because you're seeing so many things. You're seeing the ovarian reserve, you're seeing the endometrium, you're seeing so many things. Then you can assess the dose and everything. So if in the scan there is nothing, then don't do E2 in an IUI cycle. Absolutely waste of money.
Okay. Only if any suspected follicle or simple follicle, if is there, then we can do estradiol level.
Yes.
Okay.
And if it is more than 2 centimeter like that.
If follicle day 2 more than 2 centimeter,
do an E2 level. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello.
Tell ma'am.
Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, in CC plus gonadotropin cycles, we give CC from 3 to 7 and HMG on day 3, 5, and 7. If
Yes.
we don't find a follicle of 10 mm size on the 7th day scan, then like how do we proceed further with gonadotropins, ma'am?
Yeah, suppose if you don't see any follicle at all, you can increase it, madam. You can increase it to 150.
By half. By
yeah,
half, you mean?
by
Okay.
half. Then you do it, give 2 doses. So 2 doses on alternate day, again do a scan. See if there is response or not.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. So 7th day, after the 7th, we can give on 9th and 11th, you mean to say?
11th day also, madam. And this is one way of giving. So some people usually I follow this. And some people what they do is after 5 days of Clomid or 5 days of letrozole, then they start like 3 consecutive days of gonadotropins as well. But I feel this is more spaced out and we have more control.
Okay, ma'am. You mean to say till we attain a good follicular growth, we can continue with the gonadotropins? Like for how long can we give?
Yes. See, so that is one reason, madam. Like how long? Suppose if you keep on going, we don't want a lengthy follicular phase as well.
Yeah.
It means the dose that we have selected in the beginning is wrong.
Okay.
Because like we suppose if it goes on for 21 days or something, then the cost is increasing for the patient too.
Yeah.
That also
So
we
can
consider.
Next cycle we can start at a higher dose, you mean to say?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Oh.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
How in IUI cycle, how do you decide to give whether FSH or HMG? What is the role and what is the difference between these two gonadotropins?
If the patient is PCO, better to go for FSH levels, FSH injections, madam. If it is a non-PCO, better to go for HMG because they respond better. PCO women for FSH. So if the woman is having PCOS, give FSH only.
Hello, madam.
Tell ma'am.
Is there any role of urinary LH for ovulation induction, ovulation prediction?
For ovulation trigger, you mean?
Yeah, yeah. Whether she has ovulated or not, can we know the urinary?
Yeah. See, madam, any kit. See, when you are having a scan, you are seeing with your own eyes. That is much more easier. So we were using this urinary LH where the scans was not there and there was no easy access to the healthcare like in UK. Like you cannot just walk in for a scan. So we used to ask them to do a urine LH kit. Then once they show ovulation, we used to ask them for IUI. But here when we're able to do scans, our scans are much more reliable than your LH kit.
Okay.
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 Okay, ma'am. Suppose if any doubts, you can just take my number from Bhargav and you can text me or WhatsApp me. I'll be there. Then we can take it from there, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you all the doctors for your valuable time. Definitely we'll keep on doing such kind of programs and interactive sessions with all your support.
Thank you, Dr. Saroja, for your excellent presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. And it was a pleasure.
We had so many,
have an interactive
queries and you cleared everything.
Thank you.
So much.
ma'am.
Thank you.
With patience, you have cleared.
No, ma'am. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Madam, we are closing this session.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you all the doctors once again.